Turn that down a little bit. Turned it on a few minutes early. We're waiting on Stephen to join us. He's having OS X permissions issues, so he'll be joining us in just a second. We'll get started in a few minutes. Hopefully everybody's starting to jump in now. There you are. Stephen, just so you know, we are live. I haven't started yet, so I haven't done my intro, but people can hear us on LinkedIn and YouTube, just so you know.
Oh, perfect.
Awesome. But I'm glad we got your video, and awesome. Yeah, it's been a while since I've actually seen you.
It has been a long time, sir.
That's good. It's good. I'm glad we got to meet up. And did you just get back from S4?
Yes, I did. Last week was fun.
Awesome.
Good to see humans again.
I saw the pictures and just the social media of people that were just talking about it, and it looks like I missed a good time. So kind of sad about that, but why don't we go ahead? So it's the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. I'll start off with my normal stuff. So greetings everybody, and welcome to the Cutaway Security ICS Friday Infosec chat. It happens every Friday, and it's just a 30-minute chat to sit down with myself and other people and just kind of talk about what we did during the week. Today I'm being joined by Stephen Hilt, and Stephen is a part of the Trend Micro research team. They put out a lot of good information. You can see his picture right there. And so we'll be talking to him in just a second, but let's go ahead and start with what we usually start with. And that is just talking about kind of like our agendas, what happened, what we did at Cutaway Security this week. Last week, I talked a little bit about cybersecurity documentation review and test cases, and continued that. That was or is about a 3-week, probably a month-long project with multiple people going on. And the key thing that I'm thinking about today out of all of that is the challenge of trying to use process engineers and operators to secure applications like web servers and databases. And in my mind, that is not a winning solution for any organization. You really should be leveraging your experts in those types of applications to secure those. Now, when we think about our operators and engineers, they're experts in our processes. They know how to configure things to get them working, but as soon as they're working, usually they're off doing some other thing with the process. So we should be getting them support, subject matter experts that know how to secure web servers, know how to secure databases, know how to secure the operating systems, and allow them to do their jobs, work with the engineers and operators to ensure that everything is still working, but making sure that those applications are secure. So that's what I've been doing today or this week, and trying to improve that for one of our organizations. Next week, I'll be in San Diego. I know, so we've got a security conference. I won't be there for the SANS security conference that's going on in San Diego next week, but I will be teaching starting May 5th, the ICS 410 class. I might show up. Apparently, Wild West Hacking Fest is going on in San Diego as well, so I might show up out there, drop in if we have the chance to do that. But what we're here to do today is we're here to chat with Stephen Hill. And as I mentioned, Stephen is here with the Trend as a representative of the Trend Micro research team. If you're joining us on LinkedIn or YouTube, we're watching the chat. Stephen can see the chat. If you're posting questions in there, I can do it as well. And we'll try to get to your questions about the research. Hopefully you were able to, hopefully you saw the link that I posted so that everybody can see the research that's out there. But why don't we go ahead and hear from Stephen himself. Stephen, why don't you introduce yourself, what your background is. I'm familiar with you from a lot of different places, but please go ahead and introduce yourself.
So, as Don mentioned, I'm Stephen Hilt. I'm a senior threat researcher for Trend Micro, where I do a lot of broad research topics. I work on a team called the Forward-Looking Threat Research Team. What we do is try to find threats that are upcoming and investigate them and see how criminals and other people might be using them. So that leads into the research that we did just now. My background is very ICS focused, but I've kind of gone away from ICS as a heavy focus area and try to get a lot more knowledge on threats and then bring those back into the ICS community to see how those groups that are affecting other industries might be eventually migrating to and attacking our industrial control systems as well. So that it's kind of my background there. And so, yeah.
So, I mean, you're, I'm familiar with you from so many different places and so much research that I like to follow. I always, whenever I'm teaching my class, I point out your honey nets, that the research that you did. I think was all of it with Trend Micro, the research that you're doing associated with spinning up water facilities and seeing how threat actors came after them.
Yeah, so it all started with Kyle, who's now at Palo Alto. He started one of the first ICS honeypots and did a lot of research in there. And we continued that with the factory honeypot that I talked about at S420. Yeah, S420, a lifetime ago now, it seems like.
Right.
But spoke about it there and just trying to gauge, kind of build high interaction honeypots to gauge what criminals would do if they actually got access to those systems.
Right. And when we're talking about, for those people that aren't familiar with honeypots, you might be familiar with a honeypot from the aspect of a system within your network, whether it's corporate network or your control network, a system that is not a part of the normal operations, that's just there to attract threat actors, provide them with resources that they might come after. And it's usually used as a part of a detection technique. But those are low interaction honeypots, meaning that they're just designed to identify suspicious activity so that we can investigate it. What Stephen's talking about here, that the high interaction honeypots are things that we build specifically so that they look like a full process. And these aren't usually things that a normal company is going to build and deploy. It's usually something that Trend Micro, Mandiant, or some other organization that's used to or wants to research what threat actors' capabilities are, tools and techniques, and so forth. And that must take a lot of time and research to get it spun up and implemented correctly.
It does. It takes a lot of time and effort because you're mimicking a whole pretty much network. So one of the things, and we talked about this with the factory honeypot, was there was a lot of time spent into it, just maintaining it, checking our logs and checking things like that. We almost had to become employees of our fake company
Right.
to support it. And that's just kind of the part of it. There needed to be daily interactions with the systems, because when the actors come in and it's just a stagnant network where nothing's happening, like files haven't changed, things like that, they'll notice that, especially with the level of attacker you're trying to draw into your honeypot to watch their TTPs.
Well, I imagine your process had to be, correct as well. I mean, were you actually deploying devices, or was it more of a like software PLC and so forth?
No, there is actual PLCs. They're actually in my attic over here.
Nice.
So that
Excellent.
I got tired of them being in the office clicking all the time. So with the relays going off, so they're out in the attic because it's industrial devices. They can take the heat and the cold.
Yep. Awesome. Well, actually want to add this back to the stream. So we're here to, I mean, so that's your previous research, and we definitely want to highlight your team's hard work on some of the current stuff. And the article that was put out on Trend Micro's website is how criminals abuse cloud tunneling services. And you were specifically you talk about cloud services in general, but you focused on I don't know how to say it, but the ngrok
Yep.
service. And I want to highlight for all of our listeners, before we go down this path, we're going to be using the terms ngrok and cloud services networking interchangeably. In other words, a lot of this research, a lot of Stephen's research is on the ngrok, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other cloud services that are providing similar types of services and capabilities that you need to be concerned about within your organization. So I want to put that highlight there.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that I want to talk about, but can you kind of describe what that article did, what your
Yep.
research entailed, and so
Yeah. So what you were saying about ngrok specifically in the cloud tunneling services, and there are multiple, lots of types of this and different products that are doing it, not just ngrok. We focused on ngrok because when we started looking at all the services and the within our feedback data, it came clear that over 90, it was like 98% or something like that of the traffic we saw was ngrok and not the other services. So that's one of the reasons why we focused on it, was purely due to market share, and raise awareness while mentioning all the other ones as well, that we saw were common. There are more of them out there, and it's something that we all need to be aware of that's going on. So the cloud tunneling services themselves, think of it as a really great way. And I put this in a tweet in my thread when we released the research. The reason why this all came about was during the pandemic, my kids wanted to chat with their friends because they were remote learning still at that time. And they wanted to chat with their friends, and the school district blocked them from using Google Chat, more or less, within their in the platform. And so I built a chat platform and then wanted to give it to his friend or their friends, so they could chat. And what ended up happening, I was like, I'm not going to expose this thing to the internet. That's just a bad idea. So what we ended up doing was I looked and found ngrok as the perfect solution for it. I didn't have to open up the whole internet to my house. And the way it works is you use their binary. It is for Linux, Mac, Windows, and all a bunch of different other flavors. Um, ARM and Intel and all those things. So really, and you run it with either HTTP or TCP, depending on which one you want to forward. So you can just forward yourself just a TCP port. It doesn't have to be HTTP, but in this case it was. So you do HTTP and the port on the local host that you're running it to the port that you want it to point to, so the web server itself. Then after that, it just runs for about a few seconds and tells you, here's the URL and here's a bunch of logs that you can go to. And so what happens is, and there's a really good diagram in the research that shows how all this works, is it more or less is just a tunneling into a cloud. So ngrok uses Amazon AWS. So that's kind of how ngrok works, and how the other tunneling services we played with actually work about the same. ngrok has more features than some of the other ones.
Yeah, I mean, this just sounds like a reverse shell to me. I mean, it's
It is.
like reverse SSH or something like that.
Yeah, some of them are purely just reverse SSH tunnels, but
Okay.
this is a reverse SSH tunnel with some smarts.
Hmm. Interesting. Which leads us to, I mean, the first bullet point I had on there was shadow access. Whether it's for put in by an administrator or put in by a vendor. Do you have any experience around that? I mean, I know your research was more towards, I mean, and it's all explained in there, but what are your concerns around shadow remote access?
So it's possible, and it has been seen before. Not sometimes it could be even insiders that are doing this. That's why it's recommended that you limit who can have access to this. And Ngrok actually, we gave a pre-copy of our research to them. They actually sent us a bunch of recommendations back that you'll find within the research too, of what they recommend people are doing, especially if you are paying for their service. There's a lot more features and service and things that you can use to help secure your tunnels and everything. So if you are legitimately wanting to use it, it's best just to pay I think it's $25 a month
Mhm.
for their premium tier that gets all the features. But one of the things that early on we found, and actually our Trend Micro released from our MDR team, was there's actually a write-up, and we reference it in the research, on using a threat actor deploying Ngrok to get more or less shadow access to the systems.
Hmm. Yeah,
That
so the kind of like the command, providing a command and control functionality.
Yeah, that there's lots of different. Be more like a remote access,
Mhm.
a rat function over than a command and control, because they would deploy it and like on the server they wanted access to, and then instead of tunneling in through their original entry point, they can get it just straight on the internet, and you're shoving it out encrypted to Ngrok.
Right. So on a corporate network, this would be a concern just because I mean we allow this type of communication going outbound. These are cloud services, so it looks like a cloud service and so forth. But certainly we're here to focusing a little bit on the control side, and this would still. I mean, it's not like this is a magic way out. It's not like this is a new cellular network or something like that. You still have to go out through
Yep.
the networking, through your firewalls, hopefully, that are between your corporate environment and your control environment. What are your thoughts around this being used within a control environment?
So we did a lot of research and looking for things within Ngrok of people showing exposing things, and it's not. We didn't find necessarily like an HMI exposed, but during the pandemic, the amount of HMIs that were exposed directly to Shodan, I know for a fact because I watched those kinds of things, those went up. And so you are seeing more and more devices exposed because people needed remote access to them. This is a great tool for remote access. It is not unforeseeable that somebody has given access to one of their systems using a tool such like Ngrok to gain access, remote access to monitor or whatever they needed for. We did see things like IP cameras that people are trying to use this as a kind of like, instead of just exposing it straight like I wanted to do with my kids chat, to put it on the internet in a more obscured way.
Mhm.
So security through obscurity, classic. um, so I wouldn't say it's not feasible that somebody did this. So we did see home automation systems in the research. We show an example of a home assistant that we found, which gives control to a house. I'm sure there was, building automation, things like that as well can be easily found if you know the URL. Now, the hard part is knowing the URLs,
Mhm.
because they're very hard to brute force. So going out there and going, I'm going to scan all of the Ngrok URLs is nearly impossible.
Oh, okay. So that's interesting. I mean, and I guess that's a feature that they thought of at the beginning. If somebody was concerned about this, remote access, I saw in your write up, talking about the IP addresses for that for the nodes that ngrok uses, using DNS as well. So those would be some network indicators of this communication. But you also, while we're just talking about, you just talked about how we needed needed to have an executable that is that's running on the system. Would that be another way that somebody would detect this usage on their servers or
Yeah,
system?
yes. If you find ngrok, it's pretty much an ngrok.exe.
Mm.
Um, that would be an indicator that it's going on. You could also look for the parameters of the ports or the protocol and port to any exe. If somebody came in and renamed ngrok, it would change that. But the parameters would be the same and the behavior would be the same.
Is that so? Is that executable required? I mean, is malware writing their own connections to ngrok? So it's that
Yeah, yes.
application.
So that would be if it was on your system, but say in the paper we went through this, the most common malware we saw using ngrok was njrat. So njrat is just using a ngrok URL. It's in the config file. We have an
Okay.
example in the research. So they're just going to I think in the example, the way the TCP works is it's a number, so 0 through 8, I think, and then it repeats, but those go back to the same servers. Um, so it's go with 0.tcp.ngrok.io, then a port, and then that's your system. So that's what you'll find is those. And so you still need to go to ngrok.io. However, if the actor knows the IP address of which, like 0.ngrok, that kind of rotates between some IPs, but you can use one of those IPs that it ever resolves to, and you would still get to the service.
So one of my concerns is, I mean, ngrok is really providing a kind of like a third-party network, right? And or at least that's my current understanding of it. Is there any risk, any information that's going across a third-party network, we need to be concerned about somebody taking advantage of that for machine-in-the-middle attacks? I think of monitoring, modification, blocking, and injection. So is that a concern for using these services if you're using it for legitimate purposes?
I would say absolutely. As an example, in the research, we mentioned that there is, if you use HTTP, they'll also tell you the HTTPS, that there is HTTPS, and they are creating the certificate.
Okay.
So now, with that said, if you pay for it, there is ways to apply your certificate to ngrok, so it's not using their certificate. Um, so there is, again, if you are using the free version, there is a lot of issues, and I would recommend if you are transmitting sensitive data or trying to use it for the best use case for this is using it for. I have a friend that uses it for DevOps. So it's how do they test their dev system that they don't put the dev system on the internet, but they want remote users to test it.
Interesting.
So instead of giving them VPN access or anything like that, they really want to know what it looks like. Does it work web-wise, remotely, those kinds of things? And that's kind of how they're using it. So in that case, they just make sure that that system doesn't have any real data. But with that said, you want to make sure that all of your data is protected the way you want it to be protected, and using services like this have a risk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you talk about actually getting with the ngrok team, interacting with them, before publishing your research and during, I guess, during your research. So it sounds like they did a pretty good job of that, either addressing your concerns or pointing out their recommendations that were already there. So what was your experience around disclosure around?
Oh, It was one of the better ones that I've had in a long time. So they were responsive. They confirmed all of our findings and say, "Can you put these recommendations in your paper?" And it was April 13th. They made a bunch of back end changes that addressed some of our larger concerns.
Excellent. Yeah, it's always good when we see him doing that, and getting out in front of the media relations, right? Talking about it, saying that, hey, yes, this did happen. We did respond. Here are recommendations. Not every vendor plays nice, I guess. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah. Yeah. They were very responsive, understanding, and want to have a continued dialogue with us about security on their platform and things like that, which is good. It's good to hear people really get it. And like we were talking to them, and they mentioned how much their company has grown from a couple people to 100 of people just during the pandemic, because people needed services like Ngrok to aid their solutions.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that people uh, need to understand and be patient with. There's, a lot of any service like this, any solution that's being selected, whether it's in a corporate environment or whether it's in our control environment, anything that's new and hot, usually they start small, and then there's rapid development, rapid growth, rapid influx of people and technologies. And, we need to understand that that's a part of the process, that, security, what you don't want security to stifle innovation, but at the same time we can hope that it's initially designed with security in mind, but understanding that the growth is going to put things at risk, and we have to do security research like you and your team are doing to identify these things and get in front of it. So it's something I like to point out when I'm talking to people about these type of issues.
Yeah, one of the things, and a good takeaway from our research in general, and you'll see this theme, and I think a lot of people know this, but it's always good to reiterate it, which is services like Ngrok provide a valuable solution to people. It's a legitimate tool. There's nothing wrong with it. The problem is that when you make a really good tool, criminals will also want to use it. So that's where, when I started doing this research after using it for one of my kids, it came down to, I went, this is neat. I bet criminals are using it too, to do exactly like, and you just hypothesize all those things that a criminal might be doing. And you go from there. And yeah, it's when you build something good, criminals will also use it.
Right, and they can't predict all those use cases, but certainly understanding that, and not burying your head in the sand, and realizing that threat actors are taking advantage of certain things. It goes to the operations of organizations like Ngrok, and in my mind, behooves them to try to prevent that as much as possible, rather than just ignoring it completely.
Yep.
Yeah. So what, you're off on all these projects. This one kind of just dropped into your lap. What can we expect to see from you and the Trend Micro research team in the future? Anything that you can talk about, about what you're focusing on?
A lot of the continued successes and things like that. Recently, we've published a bunch of really good stuff. I don't know if you saw, but at S4, one of my coworkers presented on attacks from the 4G, 5G core. Specific.
I haven't caught up on that yet.
So I can shoot you those links, and you can read up that research that they released. And then they were also, another coworker presented on DDS fuzzing, so fuzzing the DDS protocol and how that went, which we all know how that went. And then I've been doing myself have been doing a lot of cloud-based looking at cloud infrastructure attacks as well. So I released with some coworkers research into crypto mining groups attacking cloud infrastructures. Went through a pretty deep dive of the major groups that are involved in that, and continuing kind of that same approach, moving into. I also did a bunch of IoT malware things, looking into Cyclops Blink, which was the supposedly sandworm botnet that the FBI ended up doing a takedown on.
Awesome. It's so much research and giving back so much to the community, and that's pretty awesome. Stephen, I've always been impressed with your work and followed you pretty closely. I can't wait till Dell puts some of those videos up. If he's intending on doing it, and I can watch that. But out there on the Trend Micro website is where all these articles are written up. Is that right?
Yep, it's Trend Micro Research specifically. That section of the page is where all of our research gets released, and a lot of people at Trends Research, more research teams than just ours. There's ones that are not crime related, but do a lot of really good stories around the technology and how it should be used. Crime stories and just general malware that's affecting a lot of things.
So, and real quick, we've only got a short bit of time, but I get a lot of questions on security research and control environments, and so what would you say to that question? And I know people ask you, but what's your response to how do you get started in researching like you've done?
A lot of it, if you go back to the ngrok example, sometimes it's just having the curiosity to going, how does this work? How could it be abused? And things like that. I think the big thing is to start research, especially if you're doing it at a company, you got to have permission first. Don't find yourself getting in trouble because they found out that you're doing it and you're going to speak at a conference. Always get permission, talk thoroughly. You'll be surprised. A lot of people are supportive of you doing research and looking into things that specifically affect you. There's a lot of times that you do research and you don't really want to talk about it either, which is fine, because doing research for the greater good is also a very valid thing that you should be trying to do, and a lot of people do it. So
awesome. Well, Stephen, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at sjhilt. I'm on LinkedIn. You can I'm sure Don, you mentioned me on LinkedIn, so you can click me. You can add me if people want. Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm also always free to chat, or not always free to chat, but I'm free to have questions. If you want to ask me later, I will respond. I won't ignore people.
Awesome. Well, Stephen, once again, I really appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. The tens of people that are going to see this, but it's always you're always putting valuable things out there. I make sure that I point out that people should follow you, and I appreciate everything you give back to the community. So thanks for joining us here.
No problem. If you ever want to do this again, let me know.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for another Cutaway Security ICS Friday Infosec chat. That's our half an hour. Everybody have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week. Thanks a lot.